Hey everyone, welcome. So today we are just going to talk all things immigration. So if you have questions, put them in the comments. If you would like to ask me questions, again, put them in the comments. That's what I'm here for. Um, for those that don't know who I am, I always forget to do an introduction on my lives because I just assume if you're here, this is about immigration law and you probably are interested in US immigration or you are in the immigration system in some way, shape, or form. So I am Attorney Lilian Chukura. I'm a U.S. immigration attorney. I have to say the U.S. part because I do get people that watch my stuff and ask me questions about immigration to Canada, and I have to unfortunately disappoint them by saying that I only handle U.S. immigration. So that's why I have to always say U.S. immigration attorney. And I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the US immigration law system. So when people think about the US immigration or what happens with US immigration, they usually just look at um, deportation and all that stuff. But there's so much more to US immigration than just deportation and immigration court. That is a huge part of US immigration. However, there are a lot of people that are just looking to file for their family to get citizenship, people that already have a green card or have a basis of getting a green card, just want to go ahead and file. So my main focus is on those people, right? People that either are in the process of getting a green card, want to bring their family to the US, are looking for ways to make that possible. So, hi, Frederick. If you have questions, please put them in the comments, say hi. And yeah, let's just chat about US immigration, what it means, who it affects, what's going to maybe happen next week. As many of you know, we are getting a new president on Monday. So that also means we are going to have new immigration policies because each president gets to set immigration policies. Unfortunately, that's just how US immigration runs. It is not like a steady thing with each president. The policy goes with each president. The law is set by Congress. Okay. So the president gets to decide how those laws are applied. That's the policy part of US immigration. So when we talk about, you know, the policy may change or the way things are applied may change starting next week. We are not saying that immigration law itself that was passed by Congress is going to change overnight. We're saying the way that it is applied can change overnight. So who's a priority for deportation? Clearly, there's laws that says if you are in the U.S. and you're undocumented, you can be put in immigration law process, immigration court process to get deported. Right? That is the law. Now, how each administration decides to, um, make that law happen is different. So, who's a priority? Are they going to detain people at their work? Are they going to do raids at um, at workplaces? Are they going to detain people if they have a court case and now there's an ICE detainer? All those things are policy things, not really law. So that's why I say the law itself is already there. It's just how the law is applied that is different. Okay. So, question: will a Canadian citizen with USA permanent residency go out of status if he or she stays more than 6 months out of US? So, as a permanent resident, great question. by the way. As a permanent resident, you are saying that you want the US to be your permanent home. You have to show that you want that. Okay. So, all throughout your years as a permanent resident, you have to maintain your residency. Do you automatically lose your residency because you're out of the US for 6 months? No, you don't automatically lose it. However, there is a presumption that comes up because if you're not in the US for 6 months, there's a presumption that's going to come up that maybe you don't want to be a permanent resident anymore. So it's not that you can't be out of the US for more than 6 months. It's just what can you show US immigration to basically prove to them that you want to be a permanent resident, that you are still a permanent resident. So, do you have a home in the US? Do you have your family in the US? Why are you outside of the US for more than 6 months at a time? Do you have, are you filing your taxes? Are you doing all the things that someone that lives in the US is supposed to be doing? Second part of that is if you know you want to be out of the US for, let's say, a year or more, what you can do is apply for a reentry permit. Okay. If you're just trying to finish up your life or whatever you have going on outside of the US so that you can fully focus on living in the US, that's where the reentry permit comes in. You can use that to leave the US. You can be outside of the US for up to 2 years with that reentry permit without it affecting your permanent residency. Now, without a reentry permit, if you stay out of the US for 2 years, that is definitely going to affect your permanent residency. Sometimes that will lead to you being put in immigration court proceedings. So it's really important that you know what your plans are as far as how long you want to be outside of the US before you make those moves. All right, next question. I'm a green card holder and I want to visit Puerto Rico. My question is, will it be considered as going out the states or within the states? So technically, Puerto Rico is part of the US. So it's not going outside of the US. All right. Now, if you are on a flight back to the US from Puerto Rico or to Puerto Rico and it diverts to one of the islands close to there that's a different country, then you are outside of the US and you have to go through US immigration when you're coming back to the US, right? Either you're going into Puerto Rico or you're going back to your home state. Um, it's rare that your flight gets diverted, but it's not unheard of. It actually happened to a bunch of people last year. So if you are going to be taking those trips, you're a permanent resident. So that's not typically a fear. It's if you are not a permanent resident and you have to go through US immigration, then you would be worried. But as a permanent resident, traveling to Puerto Rico and potentially having your flight diverted, it's not really a concern because you're a permanent resident. You can just come back to the US as permanent resident. Okay. So that's not really something that a permanent resident should be super concerned about. All right. Next question. Frederick, my wife applied for green card for a year and a half, and they asked me to bring evidence of medical, and I resubmitted it, and I was worried, and I had to call them last week. Okay. Okay. So if so they told me that they don't need anything else from me. So yeah, so if you receive a request for evidence from USCIS asking for your medical exam, well, you have to provide it and it looks like you provided it. Once they receive what they ask you for, then they can start processing your case again. So when they send out a request for evidence, your case is on hold until they receive the response that they asked for. Then they can kind of put it back into the system to start processing again. So if they don't need anything from you, then they don't need anything from you. You just have to wait for them to either schedule you for an interview or move your case along to approval. Okay, so it taking a year and a half to get to a request for evidence for a medical is not really of concern, because some places it's taking longer than that. So just know that when you do get those requests for evidence, your case will be put on hold until you send in your response. So don't expect your case to kind of immediately go to the next stage once you send in that response, because they have to kind of put it back into the system to start processing again. All right. So remember, if you're joining me and you have questions, feel free to ask your questions. And then while I'm waiting for your questions, right, let's talk about what we can expect starting next week. It's almost here, right? It's almost here. I am going to continue to be optimistic because, well, we are what else are we going to do, right? What else are we going to do but be optimistic? And I will continue doing these videos and updating you and answering your questions, because that's what I can do, right? That's what I can do in my own little world, is do these videos, update you, answer your questions. That's how I can help. So I will continue doing that. Continue asking me questions. And with everything that may be changing, like I said, US immigration policy changes president to president. Okay, that is normal. What may not be so normal is the giant shift that we may experience starting next week. Okay, the shift, not so normal, but does it change president to president? Absolutely. The Biden immigration policy is not exactly the same as the Obama immigration policy. So that's what I mean. It changes president to president. However, the shift between Obama and Biden was not huge, right? It was not huge. But the shift between Biden and Trump is going to be huge. So we want to prepare for that. One thing that I am doing on my end, we have a video posted this week about knowing your rights. That's what you can do. Let's control the things that we can actually control. All right. If you're in a situation where you may be undocumented or you're in between status, like your status is not super permanent, for example, DACA, TPS, in those status, you want to make sure that you know your rights. And to the people out there that's going to tell me that someone that's undocumented should not have rights in the US, well, look at the Fourth and Fifth Amendments. Okay? It's in the Constitution that if you're in the US, you have rights. So just because people may tell you that you do not have rights, you do have rights. Okay? If nothing else, know that. So if you want to know all that information, it's in the video from this Tuesday. But quick overview of it is you need to know that you do have a right to remain silent. This is one of the major things that gets people in trouble. I have spoken to my criminal law attorney friends, and what gets their clients in trouble the most is talking too much to law enforcement. As an immigrant, I can tell you that we have a tendency, or I have a tendency, to try to explain myself so that the other person can understand me and, see where I'm coming from. And maybe they will, not take certain actions. Not in this situation. Okay. Whenever you're talking to law enforcement, that means police, ICE, USCIS, even though USCIS is technically not law enforcement, they do work very closely with ICE because they are in the same Department of Homeland Security. Okay. So whatever you tell USCIS can be passed along to ICE. So knowing your right to remain silent. And that is a very, very important right. And making sure that you exercise that right is super important. Okay. You, no matter your immigration status, as long as you are in the US, you have a right to remain silent. Okay. You have a right to an attorney. Because immigration law is not criminal law, right? The US government is not going to provide you with an attorney, but you do have the right to an attorney. Okay. You will have to provide yourself with an attorney because that's just how immigration law is. It's not criminal court where, there's been litigation that says everyone deserves a right to counsel. And if they can't afford one will be provided to them. That's not in immigration. In immigration, you just have a right to counsel. Okay. So you can choose to hire an attorney, okay, to represent you, and you can choose to not speak to law enforcement until you speak to an attorney. One other thing to keep in mind is do not, and please, for the love of God, do not sign anything. Do not sign anything that you do not understand and 100% agree with, unless your attorney has reviewed it and explained it to you, you understand it, and you are ready to sign it. One group of people that sometimes just don't think um, is permanent residents. So if you're a permanent resident and you're out of the US for, let's say, a year or more, if you're coming back to the US and you are put in secondary inspection because you've been out of the US for so long, the officers at the airport, CBP, will will in most cases try to get you to sign away your permanent residency. Okay? And some people don't know what they're signing. Okay? They will tell you, "Oh, it's not a big deal because you're outside of the US, you can just sign this. It takes care of everything." Yeah. Once you sign it, you're no longer a permanent resident, and they can now get you out of the US. They can put you on the next flight out of the US. So do not sign any document without speaking with an attorney first, without fully understanding it first. Okay? Very, very important. All right. Question here. Oh, hi, Dee. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me. Remember to say hi. Mateus, hi. Oh, thank you for joining me. All right. So, do you know when Africa start giving interviews? So it depends on the country. Most almost every single country is scheduling interviews. The question is just how long it's going to take before they get to your case. But it really depends on the country. But they're definitely scheduling interviews. Nigeria is definitely scheduling interviews. I can tell you that much. Nigeria is definitely scheduling interviews. It's just taking a very long time to get your interview, but they are scheduling interviews. Okay. Once your case is documentarily qualified, um, it's taken like close, depending on the type of case too. If you're an immediate relative of a US citizen, it can take like 2 or more years. I know it can take 2 or more years from you being documentarily qualified to then getting your interview. Unfortunately, it should take less time. But if y'all remember, Nigeria was put on the Muslim ban, so they were not scheduling interviews during that time. So that was something that held up interviews. And then, secondly, there was COVID, where Nigeria was completely closed for a long time, right? The embassy there was closed for a long time. So it's like they're playing catch up. Most countries are playing catch up right now. Most European countries are not playing catch up because they were able to like reopen and move their cases along. But most African countries are playing catch up. So, yeah. The backlogs are very long right now. All right. What will happen after receipt notice, marriage package adjustment, and how long for the EAD card? So, marriage. So after you get your receipt notice for a marriage-based adjustment, the next thing that will happen is your biometrics notice. So if you've ever filed any other applications, like let's say, for example, you had TPS, so you already did a biometrics, USCIS can choose to reuse your prior biometrics, or they can have you come in for a new biometrics. So if you've never been fingerprinted by US Immigration, you will get a biometrics notice asking you to come in and get fingerprinted, and they may also take a picture just to do their background checks. So that's the next thing. Your EAD card will not start processing until after they have your biometrics. So just know that. All right. So once your biometrics is done, then they can process your EAD. Right now, with adjustment of status, we are seeing about, I don't want to give you false hope, but the last one we did, we received the EAD card within about 3 to 4 months of filing. So they are trying to process those quickly. I will say that. They are trying to process those quickly, but right now I'm still telling my clients 6 to 8 months. All right. So even though I'm seeing some that are processed faster, I am still telling my clients 6 to 8 months for the EAD card. All right. Frederick, please, where is your parents from in Nigeria? So, Frederick, I am from Nigeria. I was born and lived in Nigeria till I was 11. So I'm not Nigerian because my parents are Nigerian. I'm Nigerian because I was born and raised there. We are from eastern part of Nigeria, from Anambra State to be specific. So if you know the area, if you know, that's where I am from, and my parents are from, and my husband is from. So yeah, we were placed on administrative processing at a consulate embassy. How do we receive our documents back, like marriage certificate and birth certificate? Ooh, all right. So it depends on why the embassy kept the originals. So typically, when you go to your interview, you take the originals with the copies, right? That's what we typically do so that you don't have to give them the originals, right? They don't keep your originals. So that's what we typically do. But if they have your original documents and you need it, so that's the other part. If you need the original documents back and you're not able to get it through other means, right? You're not able to just go and get another copy of your marriage certificate or another copy of your birth certificate, and you need it for whatever reason, you can request it to be returned by the embassy. So you can reach out to the embassy and ask for that to be returned. Okay. So that's the only way, is to reach out to the embassy and ask for those specific documents to be returned to you, and they will arrange that for you. But what I will say is, if there's another way for you to get those documents without asking the embassy to give it back to you, that would be my recommendation, because sometimes they may get annoyed, and if it's something that they need for the processing and then you take it back, they may request it again later on. So just be on the safe side. If you can get it by other means, get it by other means. But if you absolutely cannot, then go ahead and reach out to the embassy. Okay. All right. Frederick from Onitsha. I am not from Onitsha. I know most people from Anambra State. I know. Side notes, like very non-immigration related side note. Most people that say that they're from Anambra State will just be like, oh yeah, I'm from Onitsha, or I grew up in Onitsha. I am not from Onitsha, and I did not grow up in Onitsha. So that's always like something. It's like being from Massachusetts and saying you're from Boston or you live in Boston when you live like an hour away from Boston. That's what Onitsha is to Anambra State. So yeah, not from. All right. All right. Next question. Hi, Rebecca. Since June last year, they sent my adopted son document to the Visa Center for approval. I am still waiting to hear from them. How long will the case stay at the Visa Center for approval? Um, huh. So I just want to make sure I understand. Are you talking about the National Visa Center? If the I-130 was already approved, typically if you've uploaded everything to the National Visa Center, it takes them approximately 2 to 3 months, sometimes faster. Like right now, we're getting documentarily qualified emails within 2 to 3 weeks. Before it used to be like months. So if you have not heard from the National Visa Center after you submitted all your documentation that they requested, you may want to reach out to them. Okay, they do have a public inquiry that you can use to reach out to them and figure out what the status of that is. If you already got the documentarily qualified email, then they're just waiting for the embassy to schedule an interview, and there's really not much they can do on their end for that. But that's typically what they're waiting on is if it's already documentarily qualified, then you need to wait for an interview. If it's not already documentarily qualified, typically in my office, if it takes more than a month, after we send in all the documents, we are reaching out to the National Visa Center, seeing what the delay is, what we can be doing, if there's something else they need, all of that is what we're doing on our end for our clients. Okay. All right, next question. My girlfriend lives in Zambia. I want to bring her to New York. What visa should I ask for? It depends. I know that's a horrible answer. It's a very lawyer answer, but it depends. And it depends on if you want her to come here and stay permanently or if she's just coming for a visit. Okay. If she's just coming for a visit, you will need to apply for a B1, B2 visa. Well, she will need to apply for a B1, B2 visa in order to come to the US as a tourist and then leave once her stay is over. Now, if you're looking at more permanent option, there's and you want to eventually get married, right? So sorry, caveats, because sometimes people don't plan on getting married and they just want to visit. But if the plan is to get married, you can look at also the fiance visa as a way of her getting here. But just know once she gets here, you do have to get married within 90 days before she can then apply for adjustment of status and a work permit and all of those things. All right. But those are the options. Ask your girlfriend for her to get some sort of visa to the US. So either a visiting visa, which is temporary, she may be approved for up to 6 months of stay in the US, and then she'll have to leave. But if you want a more permanent option, then you need to look at fiance visas or a marriage-based visa if you plan on getting married and then filing for her. So it really is going to depend on what the plan is long term. All right. Let's see. Lydia, hi. How long will waiver take to just file it? Oh, just filed it in October. All right. So it's what type of waiver? Okay. If it's an I-601A waiver, those right now are taking about 3 to 4 years for the I-601A waivers. If it's I-601 waiver and the person is in the US and applying for adjustment of status, those are taking a short amount of time, maybe a year. And if it's filed because they also have an adjustment of status pending, it typically will be decided with the adjustment of status application. So it really just depends on what waiver you applied for. Okay? Because all waivers are not created equal. Um, is it a must that they are calling for interviews for permanent residents? So during the Biden administration, I will say no, it wasn't a must. People were getting approved without interviews. With the Trump administration, though, I can comfortably say that they are most likely going to do away with that, waiving the interview, right? Because they believe everyone should be interviewed. So we will see, right? Today, it's a no. As of Monday, it may be yes, everyone must be interviewed. I don't know yet, okay? But when I know, you will know, all right? But with the Biden administration, no, it wasn't a must. They were interviewing cases, they were choosing cases to interview and choosing to approve cases without an interview. I had a lot of clients that their cases were not interviewed and were approved. So under the previous Trump administration, every single case I had was interviewed. Every single marriage-based permanent resident application was interviewed. So it just depends. Okay. And Darian Wilson asking me to go home. I am home. I'm a US citizen, so I'm home. So, but thank you though. Thank you. Um, Lydia, it's a 601 waiver. Again, if it's filed with an adjustment of status, it's just going to depend on how long that adjustment of status process takes. And then if it is, if the person is outside of the US, right? If the person is outside of the US and applying for a 601 waiver, it can take 1 to 2 years. So it just depends on where you are, right? It really just depends on where you are when you're filing for them. All right. All right. I don't see any other questions. Feel free to ask me questions. Um, you know, we are, I am here to help. This is immigrants helping immigrants here. So feel free to ask me questions. And, sometimes it's going to be people in the comments that are, you know, going wild, and that's okay. And saying things, that's okay. I am, yeah, because me that I cannot agree more. It is very rude to come on my live to tell me to go home when I am clearly home, but well, in my office. But sometimes I do want to go home and lay down and not, have to be in the office all day. So if that's what you mean, if that's what you mean by go home, listen, sometimes my bed is calling me and I want to go home too, and lay down. Okay. But if you mean the other home, huh, I'm home. I am having a good day. Thank you, Florida Yardi. I am having a good day. And Kasmita, Happy New Year. Uh, it's always good to see you on the live, Kasmita, because just following your journey has been amazing. So always good to see you. All right. So if you have questions, please put them in the comments. And just know that whatever happens next week, in the weeks and months after and the years after, I will be here to bring all that information to you, because we do have some changes that will be coming, and we are we're just going to deal with those changes as they come. And like I said, we just need to prepare ourselves and be ready for it. Know your rights. The video I have coming up on Tuesday will help you um, basically have a family preparedness plan. So, what happens if the worst case scenario happens, which is if you're picked up by ICE, what happens with your family, if you have kids, how, who takes care of them, all those things. That's what I'm going to cover in my next video, because as a mom, I can only imagine what that would feel like. And knowing that you are able to take steps to make sure that your kids are going to be taken care of is such a big relief for most parents. In so that's what I will be covering on my Tuesday video. So make sure to watch that if you are concerned and just wanting to know what you can be doing right now to provide for your kids in case the worst case scenario happens. All right. So next question. When I went to my interview, I am asked to file a 601 waiver. Okay, makes sense. But on my case, it is said refuse when checking my status, and they keep up updating every month. Okay. All right. So when you go to an interview, I'm guessing your interview was at the embassy because you said refused. The embassy uses those words. So when you go to your interview at the embassy, if they don't immediately approve your visa, it will say refused until they approve it. Okay? That's just, unfortunately, you will keep saying that. So until the 601 waiver is approved, they receive proof that it's been approved, and they most likely will schedule you for another interview after that. Until that happens, it will keep saying refused. Okay, it's not you, it's not, and it updates every single month. Okay, because their system has to. Right, it's just how the system is set up. It will keep updating every single month, and it will keep saying refused until they have approved your visa. So don't worry about it. Don't be checking the visa status. Okay. The only status you need to be checking is the 601 status. Okay. You just need to check the waiver status, not the visa status. Because until that waiver is approved, the visa is not going to change, right? The visa status is not going to change. So make sure you are not stressing yourself out by looking at that. All right. Don't stress yourself out. Florida Yardi, which state are you in? I am physically in Massachusetts. However, I represent clients all over the US in their family-based naturalization and all of that immigration journey. Next question. If you filed marriage-based last June and they said interview was waived and you waited for a decision, when Trump take office, do you think there will be changes? It depends on if he says that future cases will not be waived, or if it says that all pending cases will not be scheduled for interview. Okay. So if they already waived the interview, then typically they will just go through the process of approving the case and all of that. But if they choose to do that, then yes, you may have an interview scheduled. But we will not know that yet. Okay. We won't know that yet. And that's probably not going to happen next week either. Okay. That's an internal thing that they need to figure out and have policies around. But typically, when those policy changes happen, if a case has already been put in a specific queue for a decision, it typically stays there, and they just run through those cases and schedule other ones that they haven't made that decision on that interview scheduling process, but it really just depends. Um, so June, yeah. So you may get a decision soon before any major changes happen. But they will let you know if they schedule you for an interview. Just keep an eye on your case status on that one. But because different that's a different situation than most people are in. So if you know that the interview is already waived and you're just waiting for a decision, then that's what they will probably do and just make a decision. All right. And typically, when they are making a decision of whether to schedule you for an interview after they already said the interview is waived, there may be criterias that are in place for them to make that decisions. Unfortunately, as the public, we may not know what those criterias are, and that's the problem. Okay, it's not always public on what they're basing their decisions on, but just keep an eye on that. And if any changes happen as far as changing the policy memo when it comes to interviews, because there is a policy memo right now about how USCIS is handling interviews and whether to schedule an interview or not schedule an interview. They have guidance on that. So they will need to change that guidance before that change takes place. So typically we would know what that guidance has been taken away or that policy has been taken away. And I'll bring you all of that on here. Is it hard to get a waiver for a J1 visa rule? Okay, so the 2-year residency rule for an overstay based on hardship on a spouse. Is it hard? It depends on the country and it depends on the so J1 waivers, it depends on the country. It depends on if there was funds paid by the country. So some countries are harder than others. Some countries have a process where you just send in all the documentation and they just take care of it. And other countries make it a harder, it just depends on the country and what their process is. And like I said, some countries make it harder for their citizens than others, especially when they paid for the education and they expect that person to come back and use what they learned in their country, right? So they can make that hard, but not every single country does. Okay, some countries you just fill out some forms and they take care of it. Other ones you have to go through, go through a bunch of stuff before they will take it away or give you the waiver, I should say. All right. All right. So if you're just joining me and you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. If you would like a consultation with me, I do offer a free 15-minute strategy session where you can meet with me. We can figure out if there is something you qualify for, what your next steps should be, all of that. We can talk about it and see what and how we can help you. All right. If you want to do that, you can go to my website, lilylegal.com, and click on contact us. When you do that, you will actually see my calendar and see when I'm available. You can schedule right on the website. You don't have to call us. You don't have to play phone tag. Just go on the website and you can schedule that, okay? All right. Next question. I have a friend, he's from Jamaica. He was not sponsored by anyone financially. He pays all his own fees. It depends on if he has the 2-year residency. So if his J1 visa says that he has a 2-year residency requirement, he still has to get that waiver if he's not planning on going home, right? It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if they paid for it or not, he still has to request the waiver. All right. So it's not a matter of if I'm saying what I was trying to say is sometimes it's harder to get the waiver if the country paid for it. But even if the country did not pay for it, you will still need that waiver if you have a 2-year residency requirement on your J1 visa. Okay. Eddie, how can you represent someone in New York? Where are you located? I am located in Massachusetts. So how is that even possible to represent people from everywhere? Well, I deal mostly with USCIS and the embassies. So with the embassies, we prepare everything for you, prepare you for the interview. Um, at the embassy, you don't actually have a right to have an attorney go in with you to the interview. That's just one of the quirks with the embassies. So we're not able to go to the interview, but we are able to prepare you for every single step of the way. And that's what we do for our clients when they are filing for someone that's outside of the US. Okay. And we do everything virtually. So if you're not local to me, just know we can still work with you. I have a client portal where you can upload documents, send me messages, all of that. And you get a special calendar where you can actually schedule time to speak with me that no one else gets to see that I'm available at those times. It's just client times. So that's how we kind of get around you having to come into the office. And most of my clients, even the ones that are local to me, that's how we work. People are busy. No one wants to really come into the office. So that's how we work with most of our clients. And then the ones in the US, the same thing. We prepare all the documentation, prepare you for the interview. And then for the interview, depending on your level of comfort, if you're okay going to the interview by yourself, or if you want an attorney to attend the interview with you, if it is a location that's too far away, what we do is we do have attorneys that we work with in different states that will attend the interview with the client on our behalf and basically know everything about your case and is able to represent you for that interview based on what we have told them. And they report back to us after the interview on how everything went. We do a whole debrief and we continue the process. So that's how that is possible. How do I petition for my step siblings with just little funds? Um, okay, I'm not sure what you mean by that. So let me just take the first part. How do you petition for a step sibling? You may need to figure out the funds part, but I can tell you how to petition for a step sibling or a sibling for that matter. So in order to petition for a sibling, you need to be able to show the relationship. That's really the key. You need to be able to show the relationship that created whatever marriage that created the step sibling relationship. So there's a difference between a half sibling and a step sibling as far as US immigration is concerned. So a half sibling, you can typically show the relationship with a birth certificate showing that you share a parent, right? But a step sibling, you need to not only, you have to show that the marriage that made you two siblings took place before that sibling or you, or like it has to take place before either of you turned 18 for it to count. So it's really a more complex situation when it's step siblings versus half siblings, but it's still possible. You just have to make sure that that relationship was created the right way and at the right time. Okay, under the age of 18 is what USCIS is typically looking for there. Those are typically done on an I-130, but just keep in mind, if they are in the US, they will need to remain in status because a sibling petition right now is taking 16, 17 years for a visa to be available. So if the person is physically in the US, under, let's say they came in on a B1, B2, and now they want you to file for them, can you file an I-130 for them? Sure, you can, but they will not be able to adjust their status once that visa is available if they are out of status. So they will need to maintain their status for 17 years, basically. Or if they're outside of the US, they just need to be outside of the US until that visa is available, and then they will be informed of it being approved. And once there's a visa available, the National Visa Center will reach out to start the visa application. So it's a whole steps. Okay. But as far as the funds, the filing fees are not, you can't waive the filing fees. So if you want to petition for them, you do have to pay for the filing fees. And then once the visa is available in like 16, 17 years, you do have to do an affidavit of support for them. If your income at that time is not enough to meet the income requirement for an affidavit of support, you may be able to add someone else, the permanent resident or US citizen that's willing to be a sponsor to that application. So then you'll have a joint or co-sponsor when your income is not enough. Okay. If you filed marriage-based green card last June and you're waiting on a decision on your I-130 and an I-485, do you think when Trump takes office there will be changes like calling for an interview now? Yes. You may be calling for an interview now when before you were not. Okay. So under the Biden administration, they were waiving interviews. They had a policy of waiving interviews if the officer feels that they have enough documentation of the relationship that they don't need you to come in and ask you questions and just confirm that your marriage is real. If they can see from documentation under the Biden administration, the officers were given the right to approve those cases without an interview. Okay. Under the first Trump administration, everyone had an interview. Okay. Everyone had an interview. There was no interview waivers. I do foresee that coming back. So most people may now have interviews, if not everyone. Okay. Either most people are going to have interviews or everyone's going to have interviews, but there's going to be more interviews going on. All right. Do you do visitor visas? Someone coming from Ukraine to the U.S. How easy is that? So when it comes to visiting visas, the key, right? The key to winning a visa, especially a visiting visa, is being able to show that the person has so many ties to their country that they have zero reason to stay in the US, right? They are more likely to leave the US than stay in the US. That is what the visiting visa requires. So if the person is coming from Ukraine to the US and is looking for a visiting visa, it may be harder for them to show their ties and that they will be going back just because of the war right now. Okay. So the embassy, and there's no embassy in the Ukraine right now, right? So they will need to go to Poland for an interview, and they will need to show that they will be going back once their stay is over. So it's going to be tougher for them for sure. We don't usually handle those just because of the documentation, and we cannot control any part of it. Okay. The only thing we can control is making sure your forms are filled out correctly and that you have documentation showing your ties. However, the embassy is the wild, wild west of immigration law. And the officer can take like a minute and look at your documents or not look at your documents and deny your visa. So if that ever happens to anyone out there, that you went to an interview and the officer didn't look at your documents, the officer maybe asked you one question, just know it's not you. It's just how they're trained. Okay. It's not you at all. I wish I was lying. But that's just what it is. Okay. Let's see. I have a question. Is it okay to change my name on my social security without updating USCIS and wait until citizenship? Hold on. So if you are okay, let me make sure I understand. If you are doing a name change through, let's say, the court, so you're getting a court order to change your name. If that's the process you're going through, well, yes, you have to update your social security, but typically you may want to, if you, I'm guessing you have a green card, you may want to update your green card because to make your life a lot easier. Especially, okay, you're taking your husband's last name. So if it's a marriage, if you're getting married and you're changing your name based on that, you may want to also update your green card because because one thing I have seen is if your social doesn't match your your green card, it can cause issues for you, especially with employment purposes. With travel, it's not as bad, right? If you're traveling, you do, if you're traveling, you definitely need to have your marriage certificate with you to show the name change. So that's the additional thing you now have to carry with you everywhere you go, right? So when you're doing that name change, just make sure that you update everything to make your life easier. But if you are not updating your green card, just make sure that if you're traveling outside of the US, you have your marriage certificate because I've seen people have issues. They're trying to come back. Their green card does not match their, maybe their passport. They're so like nothing matches. It becomes a problem. So just make sure that you are updating as many things as you can, or you can wait till you become a citizen to update everything. That's also an option, right? So it's just a matter of do you want to, how soon do you want to take your husband's last name, right? That's really what it comes down to. Is how soon do you want to do that? And the cool thing about the citizenship, if you do it at citizenship, right? On the forms now, which was not the case before. Before you get your citizenship, then you have to go to Social Security and update them that you're now a citizen. Now on the form, it asks you if you want them to update Social Security Administration for you, and you can just say yes, and they will take care of it. So once you're sworn in, they'll update your Social Security records as well. So that's just that's just an aside for anyone out there that's thinking about changing their name and all of that. Just know it can be updated for you with the Social Security Administration and let them know that you're now a citizen and the name as well. But typically with all of that, you still want to confirm that it was changed correctly and you're getting a new card. All right. All right. Just making sure. All right. So if you have any other questions, feel free um, to let me know in the comments. Just making sure I didn't miss anything. All right. So like I said before, these Friday lives, so typically on my Friday lives, last year, like at the beginning of the year, it was more of like I teach something and then that's it. But with the changes coming, I think doing the Q&A may be the best way to help you all. And then leave the teaching for like the Tuesday videos. So we'll see how that works out. But bringing you updates, making sure you're able to ask me questions is basically the point of these lives. So make sure as you're going through your day, if you have questions and you're like, ooh, that would be a good question to ask Lily on the next live, write it down, bring it, okay? Or you can send it to me ahead of time as well. If you and your spouse did not file taxes together for a year, can the person still apply for citizenship? So if you're filing, so how do I put this? Married people, when they're filing taxes, if they're living together, they only have two filing options: married filing jointly and married filing separately. As long as the green card holder filed their taxes, because it's a requirement for every single permanent resident. So if you're a permanent resident and you're listening to this and you didn't know, you are required to file your taxes, okay? And not owe the IRS. Those are requirements. So make sure that the person filed their taxes. That's all the citizenship application is really asking for. Do you owe taxes to the IRS? Right? That's what they care about. Whether you file jointly or separately, as long as you filed one of those, married filing jointly, married filing separately, typically not an issue. Some married couples choose to file separately because of, one person owes and they don't want their refund to be taken away, things like that. So it's perfectly fine. You just want to make sure that the permanent resident is filing their taxes. And if they do owe the IRS, which again, people freak out about this part. If you do owe the IRS, all you need to show for your citizenship to actually be approvable, even though you owe, you need to show that you have a payment plan with the IRS and you are current on your payment plan. So if you owe the IRS, go get a payment plan and start paying them if you want to apply for citizenship, okay? Because that's a requirement, right? You don't have to owe them nothing. But if you do owe them, you just have to show that you are making efforts to pay it back, right? And the easiest way to show that is by having a payment plan that you and the IRS agree on, and show that you have been making payments based on the terms of that payment plan. That way, you can preserve your right to apply for citizenship and actually have your citizenship application be approvable. Okay. That's really important, because if you owe and you don't make it up, if you owe and you don't make payments and you don't have a payment plan, none of that, your application is not approvable. So, citizenship has requirements. Having a green card has requirements. So I always tell people, you want to make sure you know your rights and your responsibilities as a green card holder, so that you don't end up in a situation where you're not then able to turn your green card into citizenship. All right. All right. So that is all I have for you today. So like I said, next week, Tuesday, watch out for my video on family preparedness, how to prepare your family, especially if you have kids, in case the worst case scenario happens and you are picked up by ICE. And if you are someone that's a US citizen or permanent resident and you have people in your life that are undocumented, you may want to watch that video as well, because it will give you ways to help them if, because most people are not going to have any ICE interactions. If that does happen and you have someone in your life that's undocumented, you may be able to be that resource for them as part of their family preparedness planning. So that's what we're going to give you on Tuesday. And then on Friday, we're going to basically do a wrap of the first week of the Trump administration and see if any changes happen between Monday and Friday. Okay. So we'll find out if any changes happens between January 20th. Yeah, I'm hoping not too many things happen and that it's not just a barrage of things. One thing that I will say is, typically, based on the last administration, when they sent out their changes, typically happens at the end of the day on a Friday. So we may not know everything by my next live, because I usually do it around this time, but we will definitely talk about any changes. And then on the Tuesday, we'll do like a full breakdown because then we'll know everything that happened on that first week. Okay. So that's what's going to be happening. And thank you, love, for subscribing. If you're watching this and you are not subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. And if you have not liked this video and you're still here with me, please go ahead and like this video. It just lets people know that this may be a video they want to look at and get information on. Okay. So thank y'all so much for joining me. I will be seeing y'all next week. Again, watch out for that Tuesday video and have a great weekend. And I will, as always, continue to bring you any updates on US immigration and just providing support here. Bye.